As usual, the meeting of the two women was totally sub rosa. Their favorite meeting place was the Grand Duchess room in the basement of the Grand Fenwick Motel, a forlorn place that had been appropriated by the GSA. The speaker said, "Listen to what we have planned for tomorrow. It should be a great moment in American history. As you know, the last efforts to impeach a president failed twice because partisan politicians in the Senate failed to perform their duty and vote for conviction. I have been working with the Senate Majority Leader in consultation with the Vice President on a solution for this problem. The codename is Operation Omnibus Unity. Tomorrow, we will present the findings of the House Subcommittee for Presidential Investigations. In the interest of bipartisan unity, we will call on the House of Representatives to adopt omnibus articles of impeachment, applicable to all of the previous presidents. The Senate will consider all of them as co-defendants, in order to swiftly convict all of them. There are many in both parties who have a grudge against one or more ex-presidents from their own party. By including all of the past presidents, we can show how fair and impartial we are in these actions. We don't want any of the former presidents or anyone in the media to know in advance. The only media present tomorrow will be C-SPAN, and their broadcast will be on a 3-hour delay." The Capitol. At 9:58 a.m. Eastern, the Speaker looked at the monitor and was pleased. All but 2 of the House members were present, and all 100 of the senators were seated. As she had warned, the chamber doors were closed and locked, and the meeting was promptly called to order. The Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader summarized the work by college faculty and congressional staff to investigate the past misdeeds of previous presidents, deceased and those still living. They presented the findings of the House Subcommittee for Presidential Investigations and examples of several particularly despicable presidents. The subcommittee report recommended that Congress address these historical wrongs, as well as the many unreported wrongs probably committed by past presidents. The Senate Majority Leader wiped a tear from his eye as he said, "I am sad, no, I am ashamed to say that Congress never addressed these transgressions through impeachment proceedings. But now we have an opportunity to address this crisis. The Speaker and I implore our colleagues from the other party to join us in bringing justice for the people of America, justice that has been denied for too long. Let us work together today to right these wrongs from the past." The Speaker was clearly moved by his remarks. She rose to speak and used her hands dramatically to emphasize her message. Recognizing the solemnity of the day, she had selected a faux judge look, a long black dress with kimono sleeves and a black coronet upon her head. The Speaker proclaimed, "You have heard the evidence. It is time to act. The House of Representatives must return after a 30-minute lunch break and adopt omnibus articles of impeachment before we leave this hallowed chamber today. Due to the urgency of the situation and in the interest of bipartisan unity, these impeachment articles must apply to all of the previous presidents of the United States. On Monday, the Senate will have the trial. Obviously, that will not take the full day. To avoid any potential conflict of interest and keep the Supreme Court out of politics, the Majority Leader and I call on the Vice President to preside over the Senate trial rather than the Chief Justice." As he observed the Speaker's performance, the C-SPAN camera operator noted the resemblance to Emperor Palpatine in the Star Wars movies. The Speaker paused for a brief sip of her favorite coffee and continued, "There are 45 minutes remaining before we adjourn for lunch at noon. We will allow members of Congress to present their views now. Each member is limited to 30 seconds. At first, these views showed overwhelming support for omnibus impeachment, but one representative from Florida disagreed. "It pains me greatly to see this body discussing whether to dishonor the great men who have served this nation. Each of us has taken the oath of office to support and defend the Constitution of the United States." This representative did not complete his remarks. At 11:32 a.m. Eastern, he vanished in the twinkling of an eye. 68 of his House colleagues, 14 senators, and scores of aides, clerks, and security personnel vanished at the same moment. Aftermath and afterward. The surviving House members and senators responded to the loss of their colleagues in different ways. Some screamed, some sat there silent and stunned, a few fainted, and some clapped and cheered. The Senate Majority Leader suggested they take a 30-minute break and then return to complete the joint session. During the break, staff of the House presented the omnibus impeachment articles to the surviving House members, who approved the impeachment of all previous presidents and delivered the approved impeachment articles to the Senate Majority Leader. The Senate voted by a show of hands. The vote in favor of conviction was greater than the required 2/3, so all previous presidents were convicted. The sudden loss of millions of Americans shocked and terrified the White House. This was exacerbated by the associated celebratory protests and rampant violence in many cities. As a precaution, the president moved below the White House into the Presidential Emergency Operations Center and stayed there for months, until the debacle with North Korea was resolved. To protect the line of presidential succession, the vice president stayed at a secret facility beneath the Pentagon called Bunker 2. Based on the humble conditions and a pervasive odor, the vice president suspected it had recently been a storage facility for paint or cleaning supplies. The National Guard was reinforced and established a secure green zone around the key federal government buildings, while the rest of Washington, D.C. fell apart. The duo made infrequent public appearances, almost always together, but most of their public communications were made using video recordings or through their press offices. Many key people were lost in the Great Surprise, people who actually did productive and beneficial work. This had an immediate impact upon food supplies, transportation, communications, energy, medical care, and public safety. The stock market fell by 80% during the week after the Great Surprise and remained there. Financial markets and banking became unstable. The White House pronounced these to be transitory problems, but the public responded anxiously. Retail store shelves were emptied by customers and ravaged by thieves. Gas and diesel were scarce. Prices skyrocketed. Mobs rioted in most big cities. The White House declared these to be celebratory protests, and the understaffed fire and police departments could not keep up. The ratio of active criminals to available police immediately tripled. The National Guard was mobilized to help, but often responded slowly due to the loss of so many personnel. In many areas, volunteers formed armed associations and effectively protected their neighborhoods from these mobs. In the U.S., the problems most seriously impacted poor and middle-class people. The more powerful and wealthy elites were better shielded and saw opportunities for themselves in a time of chaos. Many of these elites adopted the mantra of a previous regime: never let a crisis go to waste. The U.S. President declares a national existential crisis. Congress responds swiftly with the Great New Deal, a plan to avert the existential crisis and protect the government. Will these efforts prevent the impending disaster, or will they lead into the worst of times? Which side will you choose in this great spiritual war?